Thanks for being with us on the Jim Bohannon Show as we're taking a look at Guantanamo Bay. Yes, these are issues that just keep coming back, and this one will apparently keep coming back as long as there is, in fact, a detention center at the Guantanamo Bay, Cuba Naval Base. In this portion of the program, we're speaking with former Navy JAG officer Brian Bouffard, who began his career in Texas as a case investigator and after graduating law school joined the Navy JAG Corps, served 5 years active duty as the only Navy officer in a Marine Corps legal detachment, and after a stint as an assistant criminal DA in Tarrant County, Texas, that's Fort Worth, I believe, he opened his own law firm, JAGDefender.com, acting as a civilian counsel defending service members in every branch of our armed forces throughout the U.S. and around the globe. Mr. Bouffard, thank you for being with us.
Jim, thank you so much for having me.
Your thoughts about these, these 6 who were released to Uruguay and with no guarantee that they will do anything other than join the current recidivism rate, which says, therefore, that on average 2 of them will probably wind up fighting and killing Americans again.
Well, you never know, but certainly, at least my understanding of the conditions, or really the lack of conditions under which the Uruguayans are taking these detainees, I mean, I don't see any reason why they literally couldn't touch down there in Uruguay and immediately get on a plane for Yemen or somewhere else in the Middle East.
Then why did we do it?
Well, we've got a new National Defense Authorization Act coming out shortly, and it's going to continue essentially a pretty strict ban on bringing any of these folks into the continental United States. But other countries are willing to take them, and our laws aren't really preventing us from doing that.
Well, why don't we just keep them at Guantanamo Bay, where they're nice and safe and on ice?
Well, that's a good question, and I think you go back to when President Obama was first running for office, and he made his campaign promise, "I will close Guantanamo Bay."
Mm-hmm.
And
on
here
day
we are,
one was the exact promise, so we already know that hasn't been kept.
Well, exactly, and you know that among others. But it's a priority for the administration, even though again we've had several years go by without a whole lot of movement on that for various reasons. But now we're starting to see some of that movement.
Yeah, why now, I wonder? I have had one theory about some things that the president is doing, and that is that he may have tread lightly leading up to the elections in hopes that the polls were wrong and he could avoid paying the penalty for public backlash on any number of issues, and that now that he has in fact been royally repudiated by the electorate this last November 4th, that he has been in a sense liberated. What are you going to do? Throw out my backers in Congress? In other words, he's now free to do what he always wanted to do, and maybe that includes moving in this direction regarding Guantanamo Bay.
That could be, and I don't think I have a better theory, frankly. I think that pretty much explains it.
Now, as regarding closing the base in general, we have to put these people somewhere, and this notion, I'll just repeat what I said with our previous half-hour guest, terrorists do not have a hatred for the southern coast of Cuba. They have a hatred for the United States having the gall to defend itself. And so if you build another base, and wherever you put it, it's going to, A, cost billions more, and B, never be as secure as Guantanamo Bay, which is almost perfectly located. But after we wind up with a base that's not as good and costs a ton of money, we're still going to wind up with a symbol for recruitment for terrorism. If you don't like Guantanamo Bay, you're not going to like whatever the new place is.
That's exactly right, and I've shared that opinion for a while. It's not like holding these people for a decade without trial is going to make them all of a sudden love our way of life and want to be peaceful toward us. And you're right, it doesn't matter physically where it is. It's actually almost insulting to them to think that they're too foolish to hate us no matter where we're keeping their people. So,
and conversely, as a recruiting tool, if you are in fact prone to join an organization that indiscriminately murders people, which says a lot right off the bat about your moral underpinning, and you will buy into whatever is said about the great Satan, then anything that we do, if you're that far down the road, you're already terrorist material. As far as I'm concerned, I don't see how keeping Gitmo open is going to change the recruitment of people who are already 99.9% of the way toward being terrorists anyway.
Yeah, no, I I don't disagree with that at all. You know, the real concern, you know, at least to me from the get-go, has been, you know, what this whole process has kind of done to our sense of ourselves as Americans. You know, I mean, I was born into and grew up in a country that at least I believed, you know, wouldn't torture people, and now, you know, we know that that's part of what we've done, and that, you know, again, that's the kind of thing that continues to breed this hatred, and holding these people without trial is certainly not going to, you know, certainly hasn't helped that problem.
Well, we can get into, we might as well do it now, into the notion of what is or is not torture. Yeah. And I don't believe that anything, either the Geneva Conventions or any common sense code of morality dictates that we provide 5-star accommodations for people who've been engaged in some of the most heinous acts on the planet. And again, extracting information from them, as long as you are not killing them or permanently injuring them, so you're waterboarded. I mean, I'll just say it. So what?
Well, I've never been waterboarded. You know, having read about it, it's certainly not the kind of thing that I would want to do.
No, but then again, you're not suspected of terror, and they're not trying to extract information from you.
True, but you'd also have to kind of step back and look at, you know, what is, in fact, the reliability of information that we gain by torture or by you know, forcing people to submit to, you know, unpleasant physical sensations. And, you know, again, I'm not trying to give these guys a pass. I mean, they are animals, and they've done horrible things. But it you know, again, it had always been, you know, my belief and certainly my desire for us as Americans to rise above that, and it pains me to know that we haven't. Well,
I mean, it pains me that there isn't a cure for cancer and a host of other things in the real world just aren't in the cards. I mean, and you can always, of course, go down to the ticking time bomb scenario, which is really a beautiful scenario because, A, it is plausible, and B, it has extreme moral clarity. And for those who have not heard of this, the ticking time bomb scenario is as follows. You have somebody in custody. You know that a nuclear device is about to go off in downtown wherever in the U.S., and you know it's going to happen within just, say, 3 hours. And you've got somebody, and you know he knows where it is. Now then, what are you going to do to extract that information? Now, my answer is anything necessary. And
yeah, I mean, it's Jack Bauer on 24. I don't necessarily disagree with that in that very limited context, but you just have to wonder, you know, how many of those contexts have come up in the last 12 or so years that these people have been languishing up there or down there.
I wouldn't know, but again, you know, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk some more at the whole notion of how the detainees are treated and where they would be treated if not at Guantanamo Bay. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Back in a moment. Welcome back. This is the Jim Bohannon Show. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. And we're talking with attorney Brian Bouffard, former Navy JAG officer, and we're looking at the circumstances at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Where would you put these detainees? Or would you, I assume you would not let them all go, so for the ones that we kept, where would you put them? Some brand new stateside facility that will cost billions and not be quite as secure as Guantanamo Bay?
Well, I don't really know how serious the argument is that there's some security problem in American prisons.
Well, I know there's a problem, but I just know you can never be as secure as you are surrounded by Cuba and the Caribbean Sea and a U.S. military base, and also that's already built. Whatever we build, even assuming that what we built in this country was close to that, it would still cost billions of dollars for no reason.
I think the pushback has been this fear that, you know, having them in, let's say, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, for example, you know, having them there is going to spark terrorist activity in and around Kansas. I don't necessarily believe that that's true. So you know, personally, I don't think that I would have much of a problem trying to identify those who truly are, well, you know, even as I say it, it kind of sounds ridiculous. I was about to say, you know, truly are dangerous. I mean, there's
well, that's so the thing. We don't have a dangerometer we can attach to their heads.
You're right.
So you've got to err on the side of caution, at least from my frame of reference.
Yeah, if you can.
Well, no, yes, you absolutely can. If in doubt, you stay. I mean, I can without even losing a moment's sleep about it.
Right. But assuming that it is this priority for the administration, which apparently it seems to be, if we now are going to have John McCain as the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Mm-hmm. He actually has said that he supports closing the base as well. He has signaled his willingness to work with the president. And the problem, I think, that at least in this issue and several other issues, is that I believe the president kind of started off with the attitude of I can just do everything via an executive order and not have to get the assistance and approval of Congress. And now he may be in a better position to get that than maybe he was even before.
Well, we've done whole shows, of course, about the president's penchant for just acting by edict whenever it strikes his fancy.
Yeah, but it's troubling.
But it is, and but probably not the total focus of this show. Suffice it to say that I respect certainly Senator McCain on a variety of issues, and I certainly respect his time as a prisoner in Vietnam, and I still say he's wrong also. That first of all, no way in the world we would be treating these detainees as harshly as he was treated in the Hanoi Hilton, as he well knows. I think that, very frankly, he's a little hypersensitive on the subject. Understandable, perhaps, by virtue of his experience, but nonetheless, I'm not sure that has given him the best judgment on this subject.
Well, you could be right about that. My concern, as a person who reveres the rule of law, is that it's another one of those frankly un-American things to just hold people without trial. That's to me has been the biggest problem with the way that we've handled this, whether they're in Guantanamo Bay or prison stateside or wherever they are. To me, the location is not remotely as relevant as the fact that we're just holding these people without trial, without really a good determination of who or what they may or may not have done. We don't know that.
Well, no, we don't. But again, in the real world, unless we've got some reasonable belief that, in fact, these people will not be recidivists, and our previous guest noted that the average recidivism rate is about 30% for these folks, that's not acceptable to me.
Yeah.
So, I share your feeling, but I guess I'm prepared to live more, at least as I determine it, in the real world. And sometimes all that we would like the world to be isn't really possible, or at least not practical.
That's true. And I think it's at those times that you have to pull back and rely on your core values. And I think that a core value of our nation is and should be that we don't hold people without trial. We try them, and if they are found guilty, they're punished. If they're found not guilty, they're released. And the way that we have conducted this from the get-go, from the Bush administration and carried through in virtual lockstep by a Democratic administration, to me has just been the wrong way to do that. That we could have promptly tried all of these people and let go the ones that we can't prove anything against. And to me, that's the way that we as Americans should have handled this issue.
As long as we err on the side of caution, because, again, my core value is that this country survive, and I'm not saying yours isn't, but that's number one on my list. More to come, and we'll be back in just a moment. Thanks for being with us on the Jim Bohannon Show as we're talking with Brian Bouffard, an attorney and former Navy JAG officer. We're looking at the decisions that are being made regarding Guantanamo Bay and the detainees there. Here's Mike in Falls Church, Virginia. Good evening, Mike.
Hi, I wanted to ask your guest, what is it about this war that he thinks has turned so much of this country into a nation of bedwetters, so willing to give up the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment? I mean, this isn't the country that you want to preserve. You want to change our country. Jim?
No, I don't want to, but I am prepared to do what is necessary to make it survive, and I don't like sending people back out to kill our service personnel. I know the premise of the legal system, and that is better that we let 10 guilty people go than incarcerate one innocent person. But these people are not garden variety criminals. They are the products of a wartime and the products of a battlefield, and I don't see that this is a change from the way we've handled such people in the past.
They have never been tried. We don't know any of that.
I'll put it this way. They have been tried as much as prisoners of war in any other American conflict. Well,
I'm
I'll
not
defer.
sure about that, because I think most other prisoners wore uniforms and actually engaged in combat.
Well, I don't believe that just because you don't wear a uniform or fly a particular flag or hold a given piece of territory, I don't think that that's an acceptable dodge. But let's have Mr. Bouffard join the conversation at this point.
Well, Mike, I think it's a really good question, and I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head when you look at what's going on here as a result of the society, as in my opinion it has been changed by this war, and to some extent, has been the cause of this war. I mean, we are losing our constitutional rights. The Constitution says some very plain things in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments, and the government seems to want to do everything that it can to continue to curtail those rights, not just for, well, I mean, Guantanamo Bay prisoners don't have constitutional rights, but you and I do. And
yes, you and I do, but I don't believe any of the three of us have been detained at Guantanamo lately.
Yeah, that's true.
NSA has been spying on us.
Yeah, I mean,
well, that's a whole other area that we can go into and, in fact, have on many, many programs here. But as regards this particular circumstance, I don't know the way we treat these detainees is any different from the way we treated Japanese or German or Italian prisoners of war in World War II.
Well, the issue there is, and again, the caller is correct. We're not dealing with a uniformed force that can be identified with a particular. So
they found a way to get away with it. I don't buy that. If that's the way you're going to fight, then we'll deal with you the way you fight.
No, yeah, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that the paradigm has shifted, and what we can't do now is, after the conflict is either over or somehow tamped down, we repatriate prisoners of war to their home countries. And you're right, it is hard to do that when we're fighting not a nation but an organization, an extra.
You're fighting an ideology. A, the conflict is not over. B, in practical terms, given the nature of this conflict, I'm not sure that it will actually ever be, quote, over, because we're not talking about nation states which will end hostilities. You're talking about religious fanatics who will continue waging this, and I suppose until the last one is dead, which is also a worthwhile goal.
Well, that's true, and I mean, nobody wages war on abstract concepts better than we do, with the war on drugs and such as that also, isn't working out real well.
Well, the war on drugs is entirely different from this. The war on drugs, which I don't think, by the way, gets a fair shake sometimes, since I have no particular desire to turn the country into a nation of zombies, but it's hardly the same thing as people who take up arms and fly planes into buildings. Mike, we've got about 30 seconds if you want a final thought here.
I'd just say that the opium trade is really closely related to this. It's funding a lot of the terrorism from the Mideast. So,
yeah, that's true. You're right. The people who swear this is a sinful thing to do, you're right, they sell it on top of all the else they are. They're hypocrites also.
But what I would say is I'd have no problem even executing some of these folks if you just give them a trial first. I don't like the idea of keeping someone in prison for 10, 15, 20 years who happened to be a sheep herder who took somebody's wife he shouldn't have taken or something like that.
All right. Well, that's worth considering. Anyway, stay on the line, Brian. We will talk off air again. Brian Bouffard, and we have more to come. We'll keep talking about this one. I'm Jim Bohannon, and this is Westwood One.